Hello, my name is Gordon Bingham. This is my presentation for Clinical Informatics and Digital Health, my top 5 papers from 2015 regarding informatics and the relationship between social media and health research. I'm a nurse. I work in a large metropolitan teaching hospital in Melbourne, and we are in the process of implementing a total electronic medical record in all areas. As part of my role to help roll this process out, we've done a lot of scoping of other hospitals and in Australia and abroad that have used EMRs. And elsewhere, it appears to be that the development of a population health strategy for management of patient information and patients in the community is becoming increasingly possible. So much so that the engagement of patients through various types of social media at home is often seen as increasingly essential. Our organisation, however, at this point in time has a blanket ban on access to social media sites such as Twitter and Facebook for staff. And my review is centred on the use of social media, particularly in how it relates to health and research, as I believe that information sharing sites such as social media have progressed. As their development has progressed, some healthcare organisations are choosing to remain siloed from this potential source of information. My search strategy was a systematic review conducted to identify publications that described social media in relation to health research. It was a broad search strategy adopted to include all types of study and review articles, with keyword searching of these studies subsequently used to identify only those studies where data relating to health-related topics were concerned. Searches were limited to 2015 to 16, and database-specific subject headings for social media, Twitter and Facebook, as well as related keywords were used. Published search hedges for randomised and observational studies were used to identify clinical studies. And I used Medline, Embase, Ovid, Cochrane Central and Cinal Plus. Total number of articles reviewed were 2,535, and of these 100 were shortlisted for review based on relevance of title and abstract content. Paper selection. Full texts were reviewed by myself of papers assessed as potentially meeting inclusion criteria, and final selection was made following examination of full text studies against the selection criteria. This involved research involving adult, paediatric or mixed aged groups was included. Studies in other languages other than English and those from non-peer reviewed journals were excluded. From this paper selection, it emerged that of the social media sites, Twitter was by far and above the most commonly used aspect of social media in which health-related research content was found. And the following 5 papers I presented in chronological order. The first paper, by Dunn et al. 2015, is a retrospective analysis of Twitter feed content, which sought to measure what exposure to negative opinions about vaccines as a Twitter user, specifically human papillomavirus, HPV, in the Twitter communities resulted in. The authors were particularly interested in any post-exposure association which resulted in the expression of negative opinions relating to vaccinations by those users. The authors hypothesized that prior exposure to negative opinions rejecting the safety or value of vaccination would be associated with an increased risk of those authors posting similar opinions, and they designed a study to test this hypothesis. They gathered study period from October 2013 to 14. They collected over 80,000 tweets which were related to HPV vaccines, and this resulted in a total of almost 1 million social connections from approximately 30,000 users. And they classified the tweets as either negative or neutral positive opinions, and using a machine learning classifier which had been previously trained on a sample. During the study period, the analysis found that 25% of the total tweets gathered were classified as negative in relation to HPV vaccines. And from the 30,000 users that tweeted about HPV vaccines, 30% were exposed to a majority of negative tweets. Analysis of those users' subsequent tweets found that posting a negative tweet after exposure to a majority of negative opinions was about 40%, compared to only 10% for those who are exposed to a majority of positive or neutral tweets. And this was statistically significant at a p-value of less than 0.001. The authors concluded that the nature of the structure of Twitter appeared to skew information to users who were exposed in relation to HPV vaccines, and that HPV vaccines who tweets were more often exposed to negative opinions and were more likely to subsequently post negative opinions. And the sort of conclusion was that further study, particularly in the relationship of negative views and subsequent decision making, needs to be undertaken. The second study by Dunn et al. In 2015 also examined HPV vaccines, but however it dealt with the association between exposure to and negative opinions about social media as an observational study from a retrospective analysis of Twitter contents also. However, they were more interested in aspects of social connection relating to Twitter than the outputs themselves. They used a machine learning approach to differentiate between positive and negative classifiers, and they found that the most accurate classifier that they were able to machine learn train found that it was more accurate if it used only social connection features to predict opinions. So that is, information about how people are connected on social media rather than what they write is more useful for improving public health surveillance methods on social media sites such as Twitter. Third study by Sinberg et al. 2016 conducted a systematic review for peer-reviewed original research studies, primarily focusing again on Twitter for health research. Their aim was to determine what and how social media sources such as Twitter are used to study public health. They were aiming to review all the available health research to develop a taxonomy of its use as it currently stands. They included peer-reviewed original research articles, and following the two authors which independently screened the collected studies, they then retrieved a range of information including how the data were used, analysed, methodology of the study, ethical considerations and study funding. They also included time on publication, the topic studied, and how it was funded. The demographic details from their results revealed that many of the studies were published recently, 33% in 2015. And the main areas of publication were primarily public health with 23%, infectious disease 20%, and only 1/3 of the studies mentioned ethical board approval. From a funding perspective, 63% were federally funded, 13% from university and 6% from foundation grants. Of the 1,100 articles that were analysed, 137 met the eligibility criteria, and they analysed over 5 billion tweets. The conclusion from this study is from the amount or the volume of information being gathered, it's apparent that the use of social media is growing, and the range of funding is indicative of that. The use of social media sites as a communication medium is becoming an increasingly important aspect for recruitment aspects for patients into research studies, for example, and also for the dissemination of timely information relating to individual health by a health service. Building on the previous study focusing on Twitter was Hamad et al. In 2016, who were interested in the content of the posts to see if they could apply a content analysis techniques to be more rigorous in the analysis of information arising from social media. As an emerging field, they suggested that current fields such as infodemiology, infovalence, and digital disease detection rely on research initiatives which often use both qualitative and quantitative data. And as an emerging field, there is no clear guidelines for researchers on which is the best route to take when collecting and evaluating social media content. Hamad et al. Aimed to study the effects of healthcare on social media, particularly the studies that used Twitter as a data source, and in which content analysis was used as a technique. To do so, they conducted a literature review evaluating 18 studies which they selected and explored how the data were analysed. From this information, they hoped to design a combined content analysis model to give a framework for the designing, conduction, and evaluation of investigations from social media content such as Twitter. To do so, they conducted a PubMed search of publications between 2010 and 2014 and identified 21 papers, of which 3 were excluded and 18 were analysed. Their evaluation of the studies suggested that the methods used were not purely quantitative or qualitative, and that mixed methods as an approach was not explicitly chosen in the studies. They further suggested that a more solid research framework was needed for researchers who intend to analyse social media content through the use of content analysis. And from this, they proposed a combined content analysis model, which may be useful for researchers going forward to analyse Twitter-driven studies and would ideally add further rigour to the healthcare social media investigations. The final study by Fung was a systematic review of existing research in relation to the Ebola virus disease epidemic and social media. This study was designed especially to identify research questions and methods used to collect and analyse content from social media. The authors searched 6 databases for research articles pertinent to Ebola virus disease and social media, and extracted this information using a standardised form. They evaluated the quality of the included articles and finalised a number of 12 articles which were included in the main analysis. From this, 7 were from Twitter, 1 from Weibo, 1 from Facebook, 3 from YouTube, 1 from Instagram and Flickr. All the studies were cross-sectional. 11 of the 12 articles studies, more than one of the 3 elements of social media and their relationships were present. That is, themes or topics of social media content, metadata analysis of social media posts, frequency, reposts, impressions, and characteristics of social media accounts. The authors concluded that the themes prevalent in their analysis found that published Ebola virus disease-related social media focused primarily on Twitter and YouTube. And furthermore, organisations, public health agencies, news, use social media fairly extensively to communicate about the disease. The authors highlighted the rapid changes in the social media sphere in relation to health, highlight a need for researchers to bridge the practice research gap, particularly for frontline health communications, and translating research into the development of routine health practice of contacting and being able to communicate with patients using this medium. My recommendations and predictions and questions for further research. The use of social media and its acceptance, in particular Twitter as the most commonly used medium, is that it continues to grow, and it's beginning to show increasing influence on health-related areas for individuals. However, many health agencies are slow to recognise and alter their attitudes towards online information. More research is required on social media related areas such as frontline health communicators and researchers, and by translating research development into routine practice. There needs to be ongoing surveillance of opinions, particularly highlighted by these studies in relation to vaccination and the ability of social media to influence public opinion. From a research perspective, we're increasingly moving into a sphere of big data being available from social media sites. And this may eventually be able to predict behaviour or suggest potential avenues for the development of opinion forecasting, where we can prospectively predict opinions of individuals based on who they talk to rather than what they actually say. Ultimately, the potential exists for healthcare agencies to harness this sphere of social media, not only to communicate directly with their patients, but also to begin to influence health-related decisions for the population served by the health service. And it would seem foolish for health organisations to ignore this emerging themes. Thank you for your attention. And the last slide are the references related to this presentation. Thank you once again, and I've enjoyed the online course and appreciate your time and effort in preparing all the materials. Thank you.